Welcome to Alchemy, the podcast for HR professionals who are ready to experience what's possible from the inside out. I'm your host, Sarah Maud, former HR insider and transformational coach. And I'm here to guide you into a new paradigm of HR leadership with the science, the energy, and the insights that create true, lasting transformation. So subscribe and join the movement, and let's create the future of HR together. Hello and welcome. And if you're tuning into today's episode as an HR professional that's experiencing yet another cycle of burnout, and you know that something has got to change, but you're not sure how to break this cycle of burnout, that maybe you've already tried a few things, but you've found yourself back here again, then this episode is for you. And I'm going to be sharing something a little bit later in today's episode that is about true and lasting transformation. So sit tight. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you'll know that my own background is human resources. And I spent over a decade working in the field of HR. And during that time, experienced several periods of burnout. But I didn't know that it was stress. I didn't know that it was burnout until I started to study solution-focused psychotherapy and hypnotherapy. Now, at the time, I didn't start to study this because I had any intention of doing what I do now. I just thought I got all this knowledge about policy and process and employment law and employee relations, but I don't really know fundamentally what makes people tick, what makes people think and act and behave the way that they do. So I embarked on this huge journey of learning. And it was during that time that I had what I'm going to call my own awakening. Because it really felt, it was like an awakening. It was this huge realization that I'd spent the vast majority of my career living in the hormones of stress, and I hadn't even known it. Not even when I'd gone to the hairdresser's one day and she'd said to me, "Do you know you've got this little bald patch on your head?" And I said, "What do you mean I've got a bald patch on my head?" And she lifted up my hair, and sure enough, it was almost like this tiny mini UFO had landed on my skull, and it had just left this really small, perfect little circle. And it had no hair on it. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was mortified and thinking, what the fuck? Like, how has this happened? But I hadn't realized that this had anything to do with stress. Because I think, so often we use this word stress without any real understanding of the neuroscience of stress. And it was during my journey of insight, of self-awareness, that I'd realized I'd spent most of my career in survival mode. And the other reason I didn't join the dots at the time is because I didn't see it as stress. I just saw it as, oh, this is just part of the job. Working in HR, I think it's something we can all agree on, that it's a tough job at times. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I wouldn't have swapped it for anything. But the times that I had to sit down and I had to let somebody know that potentially they were going to be made redundant. The times that another employee relations case landed on my desk that, again, involved complex human emotion. Coaching managers that were going through any number of personal situations in their home life. And there were times that I felt like I was kind of this emotional sponge, but I didn't know what to do with this emotion. It just seemed to me that it was part and parcel of the job. And so I think this realization that actually, no, this isn't normal. I'm not supposed to walk around with bald patches on my head was this big wake-up call. And it was because of this that I made the decision to leave my HR career and to take this knowledge, this wisdom, and my hair did grow back, by the way, back into the workplace. And it's the reason that I'm creating this episode for you today, to not only avoid bald patches, but to be able to stay in a career that you absolutely love without it coming as a cost to your health and your well-being. Because I see so many HR people out there doing amazing things, but they are experiencing burnout. And something really fundamental that I want to share with you, something which completely changed my life and has changed the lives of hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with and I've delivered training to, is this misunderstanding of what's really creating our experience. So earlier this year, I came across a Wellbeing report that was run specifically in the HR community. It was this report based on the findings of a survey that had been done. And as I was reading through this report, there's about 1,500 HR professionals that had taken part in this survey. And one of the questions was, what's the source of your stress? What's the source of your stress? And if you'd asked me the same question about 15 years ago, I would have likely said, if I'd realised I'd been in stress response, I would have likely said it's my job. You know, it's my workload, it's maybe the relationship with my manager, the culture, the environment. I would have pointed to any number of external environmental factors. And what I wouldn't have done is said that I am the source of my stress. Now, if you just listen to that and you're thinking, well, how am I the source of my own stress? Well, if we take a step back and we look at what's creating our experience, when we experience any of the nuances of stress, so stress can come in lots of different shapes and forms. It can come in anger, it can come in frustration, it can come in guilt, shame, impatience. Any of those emotions on that emotional scale. Well, what the brain does is it looks outside for cause and effect. It tries to work out, why do I feel the way that I feel? And it identifies what it believes is the target, and it creates an association. It's like, I feel the way that I feel because of that conversation that I've just had at work, or the email that I've just received, or this situation that I've got going on. That's the cause of my stress. And it looks like that. It really does look like that, thanks to something which we call consciousness. And consciousness, it makes everything seem real. So we're experiencing these emotions, and it really seems like those emotions are coming from somewhere outside of us. So when I started to really dig deeper into the human psyche and dig into what is creating our moment-to-moment experiences, and I saw the truth of that, well, it really did rock me and enlighten me and empower me at the same time. Because what I learned is that everything that you're experiencing moment to moment to moment isn't coming from the outer world. It's not coming from the external experience. It's coming from the internal reality, the internal structures that create your reality. And those structures have been formed over years and years and years of programming. So when we come into the world, we start to develop these mental structures about the way that we think, the way that we feel, our beliefs, our emotional responses, our behaviors. We create these underlying structures. And it's through these structures that we experience life. We're filtering information constantly. Now, the subconscious mind takes in 11 million bits of data per second. Now, if you let that land, just let that land for a moment. 11 million bits of information per second. Now, we can't absorb all of that. So we're filtering it. We're letting the brain know what information to prioritize and what to ignore. So the prefrontal cortex, the conscious mind, is taking in about 50 to 100 bits per second. And so what you think on repeat, the beliefs that you've stored, the totality of all of your experience have created this underlying structure. And it's that we're experiencing life through. And we're experiencing it through these structures over 95% of the time. So what that means is that unless you are fully conscious, you're fully present, then the unconscious mind is running the show. And so what happens is that when we're experiencing something and we get triggered, we activate an emotion, it looks like in the moment, the way that we feel is coming from the external world. But the truth is, when we're experiencing something, what the brain's doing is, in its data files, it's getting activated based on the totality of our experiences. So it's sourcing through all of these data files, what's this a match to? And so you can experience something, let's say you're experiencing something at work, you're experiencing a conversation and you feel this emotion coming up in you. And yet that emotion is based on all of the times that you felt like that or something very similar. And it's that emotion that's been stored not just in the neural networks of the brain, but it's also been stored inside the nervous system. Which is why we can be in a situation and it's like we're not even thinking anything consciously and boom, you're in this feeling. And you think that this feeling is coming from the situation. But it's a feeling that's so familiar to you that you don't even need anything to really activate it. Because it just happens so automatically, so habitually. And the truth is, when it comes to our thinking, people think that they're thinking their thoughts, but of the thousands of thoughts you think a day, well, 99% of them are habitual. They're automatic, they're repetitive. And so it gets to a point where we're not even consciously thinking these thoughts. These thoughts are just matching our inner state, our vibration, our frequency. It's like a jukebox in the back of your head. It's just playing these records. And you know that way that some thoughts, oh my God, they just sound like a bloody broken record. And they're not helpful. They're not giving you any new information about the situation, but oh yes, they're just like shadows you can't run away from. And yet all this time, we're under this illusion, under this belief that the way that I feel is coming from the external world. It's what's known as the outside-in misunderstanding. And what happens the more that you start to raise your levels of self-awareness, the more that you start to raise your levels of consciousness, you really start to see this playing out. You start to see, actually, where is my focus of attention? Where is my focus of attention? Because let's say you have had a conversation at work and in the moment it's felt uncomfortable, it's felt awkward, or it's felt quite threatening, or there's been some conflict. And yet later that night, you're still in that feeling. You're not in the conversation anymore, and yet that feeling, it's still there. And maybe the next day, and even the next day. Because you keep telling everybody else about it, your mates. You get together with your girlfriend over a glass of wine, you're like, you'll never guess what happened to me today. And so we have to say to ourselves, well, what is it that's keeping that feeling alive? It's our focus of attention to it. So coming back to the subject of stress, it really seems like the cause of your stress is coming from these external factors. But yeah, what if that's not true? What if the source of the stress is coming from these underlying structures that are shaping your moment-to-moment experience? And when it comes to burnout, burnout's really just a byproduct. It's a byproduct of how you've been showing up day to day to day. And so when I got into this field and I started to look at my own underlying structures, it was just like these light bulb moments everywhere. Because the structures that were running my show were, I need to be seen to be perfect. I need to be seen to be perfect because I've got a structure, an identity that I'm not enough just as I am. And if that resonates with me, then trust me, you are not alone. Everybody has had, whether they've still got it or not, but everybody's had this sense of self along these lines. of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable. And unless we have transformed that very limited sense of self, well, we're running our lives based on that structure. So I had this sense that I need to be seen to be perfect. I need to prove myself. If I can prove myself, then maybe I'll feel good enough. And I've worked with so many people one-to-one that I've seen this exact same structure play out. I've seen HR directors that are incredibly successful on paper, and yet they still don't believe that they're good enough. That they are feeling numb, they feel disconnected, they're experiencing another episode of burnout because they're just proving themselves, they're trying to prove themselves. They're comparing themselves to other people. You know, I often ask people, when was the last time that you praised yourself? And they often can't remember. They're not celebrating and recognizing their achievements. But when I say, well, when was the last time you judged yourself? Oh, well, that was probably this morning. Or it was maybe yesterday. But yeah, you can remember that in the moment, at the drop of a hat. And the other structure's overthinking. You know, if we're thinking these repeated thoughts again and again and again, well, they're creating neural networks. And overthinking, thinking, it's like, again, it's this illusion that, well, if I'm thinking about something, I'm doing something about it. And yet the more that we overthink, the less clarity that we have. And that overthinking, that thinking on overdrive, is what keeps our nervous system in a dysregulated state. So we can't switch off. We experience going into a high range beta brainwave state, which is the survival response. We're operating from a structure that's imposter syndrome. It's again, a big one that I see in the HR community, this sense of inadequacy. This sense of somebody's going to come along and tell me that I'm a fraud, that I shouldn't have got the job. And I've seen senior HR people, chief people officers that have been with the same organisation, that have worked their way up through the ranks, that are still holding on to this old identity. And it's these underlying structures, these thought patterns, these beliefs, these parts of us that are creating the conflict. And so if we're running this structure, well, no wonder we're burnt out. No wonder we're exhausted. And we're not living from our true potential. Because to me, living from your true potential is owning the truth of who you are, is owning your sovereignty. That sovereignty that's like, this is who I am. And I own that. I own my power. I absolutely embody that I am worthy, I am good enough, I am valuable. You know, how many people in HR are fighting literally to be seen as valuable? Well, if you want to be seen as valuable in the workplace, it starts from within. It starts with you owning that sovereignty. Because when you do, I absolutely guarantee you will be sending out a very different energetic signature. And I'm not going to go into it in today's episode, but everything that we're experiencing it first as energy, because everything is energy. And so it's, what are those signals that we're sending out? Are we sending out the signal that says, yes, I'm enough? Or are we sending out the signal of, I'm not enough? So when it comes to breaking, truly breaking the cycle of burnout, well, first of all, we need self-awareness. We need self-awareness to recognize, actually, what are these structures that we're living our life by? Because if we're not consciously creating a new structure, then you're unconsciously accepting the old one. The old one that was created in the first few years of your life, which you've outgrown. I kind of often think about it as wardrobe choices. It's like we've got this incredible outfit that makes us look amazing, feels amazing, is beautiful, is radiant, and yet we keep going and wearing the outfit that just doesn't fit us, is not flattering, is not a good look. So to change it, we need to start to recognize these structures, and then we need to work with the unconscious mind to create change and transformation at the level of the unconscious mind. And we can do that because of neuroplasticity. The brain is moldable, so we can change these structures. But how many of us have, tried to learn resilience, coping mechanisms, or stress tips, and yet actually, when the shit hits the fan, we forget them. So in order to create lasting change, we need to work at the level of the unconscious mind. And that is where my invitation to you comes. Because on the 4th, 5th and 6th of November this year, I am going to be running the HR Reset. And the HR Reset is 90 minutes of deep transformational work where you get to show up. You don't have to have your camera on, you don't have to say anything. But I am going to be working at the level of your unconscious mind to create new structures that support you as the amazing HR professional you already are. I'm going to be changing these beliefs that you've outgrown, that are not serving you, that are creating this conflict, that are keeping you in these cycles of burnout. And after 90 minutes of this deep, deep transformation, you will feel lighter. You'll feel this sense of, oh, yes, this is who I am. And begin to be able to start to show up from that structure, from this new identity. So if you are ready to break the HR burnout cycle for good, to step into feeling empowered, owning your self-worth, your confidence, then hop onto the link and secure your place. And I can't wait to see you there. Bye-bye for now.